Hello. Yeah, I'm just a little bit confused. I think I saw on one of your early videos that you said that it's actually the parents or the adults that attract the soul.
Yes.
But so it's sort of going to the point of being born into a crappy world and also free will. If the soul itself doesn't have any choice where it's born into, on this world we get a lot of different situations. There's children trying to earn a living on Indian
rubbish tips.
Rubbish tips.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And then where was I going with that?
And
also, sorry, when you pass and you're sort of floating around in the spirit world somewhere, like yourself,
which you're not doing,
Mary, and other people who've come back to Earth,
When you say come back to Earth, you mean...
Well, you've come back to Earth, you say you're Jesus and Mary.
Yeah, but not reincarnated.
Is it the same soul that you have as Jesus?
Yep.
Yeah. So, in that respect, your soul chose to come back here, or was it simply your parents that brought you back here?
No.
Who's doing the choosing, or is it a combination
Good question,
of both?
yeah. The same question was asked in Belgium, actually. In your first incarnation... the incarnation of the soul is an instinctual process. So God created amongst all of God's creatures, so you think of birds, animals, and also, obviously, this human form is an animal form, isn't it? The physical body part of it is an animal form. So if we look at the half of the soul, my half is the male half, and then I've got a male spirit body, which looks like a man, and a male physical body, that has all the appendages of the male. So this male half of the soul, when it incarnates, it's an instinctual process. It has to incarnate in order to be individualized. So how it incarnates is governed by many what are called laws of attraction. Those laws of attraction, because this soul, so back in the first century when I first incarnated, my soul didn't determine who was my mum and who was my dad. What determined who was my mum and dad was the environment that I was born into, conceived into, my mum and dad's emotional states that needed to be corrected, along with some of my mum and dad's states that didn't need correction but were a part of their nature and their personality. And where my soul goes is the best for my soul as well as for their souls in terms of development, but it's not determined by me, it's determined by law. All right? Now, what happens after then is determined by choice, and particularly the choices of my parents. So for me, in the first century, my father chose to be quite abusive with me. I was quite frequently yelled at, screamed at, belted, as a child in the first century. And also, when I was very, very young, I was sent to a military school in Egypt. And for nearly 2 years, I was tortured there, right, at my father's agreement. Right? When I say tortured there, they had physical ways of forcing children to learn military aspects of life, swords, spears, shields, using all of these things that my father believed. He thought I was the Messiah, and so he believed that I would be the leader of Israel. He thought I'd be the king of Israel, and he thought that I would need the skills to be able to boss men around, and I would need the skills to be able to control people, and I'd need to learn violence. And so he purposefully sent me to a school to learn violence. Yeah, and a part of that school, violence included things like raping women and all sorts of things. Now, I didn't do those things, but I got badly tortured for not doing them because they thought that I wasn't malleable enough, right? And so that was my father. That was my father in the first century. He had a very strong feeling I was a Messiah, and he wanted to make me into it, was his feeling. Now, many of your parents have a similar feeling towards you, right? Now, when I observed all of that, I didn't blame God for that. In my first century incarnation, I didn't blame God for that. I blamed my dad for that. right? He made those choices and decisions. But the problem many of us are doing in this argument we have with God, we would prefer to blame God for what we believe is create an imperfect system, when actually it's a perfect system being destroyed by the free will of humans, right? In other words, the free will of humans being exercised unlovingly is going to eventually affect any system because of the power of the human. It's going to affect any system that occurs, even if it was created perfect. It's going to affect it. Our unloving actions are going to affect that system. God wanted us to learn that. He wanted us to learn that if we choose to be unloving individuals, it is going to affect the perfect system and destroy it. But he also created that this earth wasn't our only experience, which is very important to our future, because if we have a terrible existence on earth because of the choices of others, and in the first century my whole life was ended because of the choices of others. You know, I wanted to live with Mary until I was, a few hundred years old at least on earth. As it turned out, I married Mary and 18 months later I was murdered. Right? That was because of the choices of others. But as soon as I arrived in the spirit world, my development of love meant that I could go to places that no human had ever been before. Right? So God also created a compensatory system for the fact that humans would choose to do unloving things. And that compensatory system lasts for tens of thousands of years, not just 70 or 80. But again, on earth, we don't have perspective. And part of having perspective is time perspective of time. On earth, we think this is the only life, this is my only experience. Having 80 years of bad experience, or in my case in the first century, a lot of my first century experience, I was tortured when I was between 5 and 7. I was tortured again in my teenage years by a group of teenagers and adults. And then when I was 19, I was almost killed through torture again. And then I was also tortured to death. In between that time, there were 4 attempts on my life as well, right? So this all happened to me in the first century. None of it's written about, but it all happened to me. Now, in the process of that happening to me, I could have said, right, I'm going to be just as evil as everyone around me. This is all unfair. All this violence is terrible. I'm going to learn to be violent and be violent to others. Or, as I did do, I saw, actually, I don't like this violence. This violence feels terrible towards myself, towards my person. It actually helped me feel like I would never commit that level of violence towards another by having these experiences. Now, I'm not saying that God wanted me to have those experiences, because God didn't. God created a perfect human world where I'm on a man incarnated, and he also, and by this stage, by the way, I'd managed to have a chat with him about it, right, because of my spiritual development at the time. And so I knew that there was this pristine earth, and humans had destroyed it. Humans had destroyed the system God had made through the exercise of their will. Now, it was very important for me to also learn that through the exercise of my will in a loving direction, I could do the opposite. I could change the world. Right? And to this day, my name is known, even though most people on earth don't recognise it as me. But to this day, my name is known as somebody who did that 2,000 years later. Right? And that's because I made the choice to actually be a loving individual, because I could feel God's intention was not the world we were in, but rather a different world. Right? And I needed to live in harmony with that. So a lot of the experiences that we start to reason about when it comes to our feelings about God, and really what many of you are expressing is your anger with God now. And you don't realise it, but these are areas that you're angry with God about. So you hear the truth The truth being we incarnate, there's no choice of the soul incarnating. It's all governed by law, and you hear all that truth, and then you go, what about the person in India? And what about all these people? But God's put in place corrections, all of those things over time. But most of us don't have any perspective at all. So an example of perspective is some of the friends that I have now in the spirit world were actually on the Sanhedrin, and they chose to kill me in the 1st century. But I knew in time they'd eventually listen to the truth. That's perspective. Right? The perspective that things change, that people change. The perspective that given enough time, many people will actually make choice to be more loving. That's having perspective. Yeah. Now, I want to finish this answer because in the process of making that decision to have perspective and to also allow to make some individual choices of my own, it doesn't really matter in a way. And when I say it doesn't matter, of course God cares, and also I care, but at the end of the day, the individualisation process has occurred the instant this soul is conceived, incarnates onto the earth. The instant that it happens, this soul is now individualised. Once the soul is individualised, it can even pass in the womb without having experience, which, by the way, is the worst thing that could happen to the soul because it has no experience in its gestation period, right? It's better if it does have one. But even the very worst thing that could happen, which is that, not having any experience at all here, it will still be able to grow, still be able to learn about itself, still be able to learn the universe. It'll all happen in the spirit world, of course, rather than on earth, but it will still happen. Right? So the process of individualisation, which was the question asked, occurs the way it does now to give you the opportunity and gift of being a parent. That's the reason why God chose to incarnate you here rather than him actually dish you out a spirit body in the spirit world. Do you understand? So each of you could end up with the experience of being a mother and a father, which, if any of you have done it, know that it's quite an interesting experience, isn't it? Don't you find that? Who of you have had children? Yeah? Haven't you found it to be a very interesting experience? Haven't you learnt a lot from it? Right? So God's given you that gift so that you could do that. Now, in the process of giving you gifts, he's also giving you a knife, really, as an example. Every gift that is given to you also has the power to cause some damage. Every gift. You think about it. Any gift I give you will have the power to cause you damage. I give you a car. You could drive it off a cliff. You could drive it into somebody else. It's going to cause damage. You could run somebody over with it. It can cause you damage. If I give you a knife, you can cut up some fruit with it, or you can stab yourself with it, or stab someone else with it. Every gift that is possible to create. I give you a house, right? It could fall down on you because I didn't design it well. But if I really designed it well and give you a house, right, there's a good chance that you'll live in it the rest of your life potentially, right? But you could choose to misuse it, couldn't you? You could, there's a support structure there and you could choose to cut through it with a chainsaw. Wouldn't be very good, but you can choose to do it. And this is the thing. We all need to come to terms with the power of our will. Right? And God's given you this experience in order for you to do that. Now, if that child goes into, like India, like Mary and I were watching a show just briefly a few days ago about people, it was people from England who went to Ghana, to see what it's like to work in a gold mine. Right? Because, you know, a lot of people in the West have, you know, gold everything on, right? I don't wear any jewellery myself, but a lot of people like it. And, you know, so they want gold, right? So they want to get bling. You know, I'm not sure why. I hate the feeling of anything on my body myself, but they want bling. So, but they don't understand the effect of the use of their will, which is, in Ghana, little children by the stage of 5 starting to work in gold mines, right? And whole families are working in gold mines all of their life, every day, going through lots and lots of pain. We talked about this in Belgium with regard to chocolate, right? You know, those of us in the West in particular, you know, like a bit of chocolate now and then. But when you look at the choices we're making and the effects it's having on people who are actually harvesting and growing that chocolate, it's actually very, very damaging to their life, you know. One chocolate bar, whole day's labour, and the average person there gets one, you know, the equivalent of about $1 Australian dollar, you know, which is about half a US dollar, to a dollar US, for a whole day's labour. And of course they don't have, you know, houses like we have, and they don't have cars, and they don't have any of these things because, you know, they walk around bare feet and they've only got one set of clothes, and, you know, tomorrow I'll wear a different T-shirt, but they won't. And it's all because of the choices we make, right? In terms of we want it at a certain price, and the companies want to make profits, and they want shareholders and all these other things, but no one's considering the poor person actually growing the stuff and the effect on the environment and all those things, right? So this is the thing we need to come to realise. It's the use of our will that is the problem here. It's not what God created. It's the use of our will, what we just chose to do with what God created, that is the problem. And we need to learn to fix our own problems. But the majority of us completely ignore our problems, and not only that, go so far as to blame God for them, which, if you think about it, isn't very fair, given the fact that God gave us the best possible start. Not only that, wants us to correct it. Not only that, made a whole heap of laws to correct it. Not only that, provided a spirit world to compensate for everything we do here. Like, he's done so many things, but he's asking you to do something, which is live in harmony with the Creator's law.